Greetings, Packer fans, wherever you may be. Time for another edition of the Pack Attack Cast. Please give us a like and subscribe for this video. We're trying to grow our subs up to at least 5,000 before the start of the season. That would be a huge achievement for us in just a couple of months. So if you're enjoying the content, please give us a like for this video and a subscribe for more Packers content on a regular basis. Some news and notes from day 2 of mini camps. I want to go through some of that. We're also going to talk about the significance of the fact that the Green Bay Packers are actually practicing today on the third day of minicamp, which is, in my opinion, a significant development, which we'll talk about later. And finally, I want to take a look at some thoughts on how this defense is going to line up week 1 against the Detroit Lions, and how the departure of Jaire Alexander might or might not change that, because I still stand by the fact that our defense last year had very little to do with Jaire Alexander, and we've only improved what we have to put on the field in 2025 from 2024. And keep in mind that defense in 2024 was a top 10 defense, and I expect them to finish the year in 2025 either somewhere between top 5 and top 10. I think there's going to be significant improvement in 2025. But let's talk about some news and notes from training camp yesterday. Packers signed a new player, defensive tackle Cameron Young. He was a 4th-round pick for the Seahawks in 2023, but was waived in April of this year. He played in 16 games as a rookie, but only one in 2024 due to some injury issues. And then he was waived in April by the Seahawks. This is a classic Goody move here. We're probably one of the weaker areas of the 2025 draft was at defensive tackle. We didn't add as many defensive tackles as I would like to have seen in that draft. So basically here we're taking a 4th-round pick from 2023 from the Seahawks, putting him into the mix onto the roster before training camp, and see if Cameron Young can actually bring that 4th-round value and depth to this roster and maybe stick on the roster over some players that are currently on the roster. So this is a great move by the general manager for the Green Bay Packers, just to bring some competition and mix into the mix for defensive tackle, since we've had some depth concerns after free agency this year. So I'm very excited to see if Cameron Young can provide some competition to the players that are currently on the roster, and we might find a player that sticks on this roster for the start of the season. We'll see what happens there. Key players that were missing due to injury in practice yesterday: Christian Watson, as we know, Julian Hicks, Rasheed Walker, and guard Aaron Banks. I'm assuming they were probably getting some veteran rest. Defensive end Colin Oliver, who has not practiced yet with the team. He's been with the rehab group. We have linebacker Quay Walker. We got a report today that Quay Walker has some nagging injuries, and they're just trying to get him fully healthy before the start of training camp. So no problems with Quay Walker with regard to contract or any significant injuries that are going to have a problem with training camp. This is a combination of veteran rest for Quay Walker plus getting him fully healthy for the start of training camp. Nate Hobbs was also missing from practice yesterday. That could be a combination of veteran rest or possibly some sort of a nagging injury. I don't have any reports on that. Cornerback Micah Robinson, cornerback Kalen King, who was seen with a cast on Tuesday, and safety Zane Anderson. None of these injuries are considered serious, and they are all expected to be active for training camp. By the way, Pack Attack Cast will be live at all of the training camp practices the first week of training camp. So we're very excited to be there for all those practices as well as the owners meeting, and we'll be reporting back to you on those items. Let's take a look at offense first for training camp yesterday. Biggest play was Jordan Love had a great 74-yard touchdown to close out camp practice yesterday on a 4th and 20 to win that practice, so to speak. The Packers were put in 4th and 20 due to a sack by Xavier McKinney on the previous play. McCole Hardman beat the cornerback and the safety and ended up going for a 74-yard touchdown from Jordan Love. So that was very exciting to see. Some people have commented that that's a little concerning to see that from the defense giving up a 74-yard touchdown, but we did not have starters on the field at the time. But it was great to see Jordan Love throw a 74-yard bomb in practice. You can actually find this online if you look on the Packers account on X. They actually posted the highlight for this touchdown, which is very rare for the Packers to do, to actually show a highlight from 11-on-11 practice. So please go check that out if you're interested. Looked like a great fun play. Looking at the offensive line, Walker was out, Banks were out, and Elton Jenkins were out. Elton Jenkins does not have an injury. He's still trying to talk to the front office about his contract, so he's not practicing right now. He's a healthy scratch. He's doing basically a hold-in right now while they try to figure out his contract. So the first team offensive line was Jordan Morgan at left tackle, Donovan Jennings, Jacob Monk at center, Sean Ryan, and Zach Tom left to right. So it's interesting to see that Jennings and Monk are getting the nod in minicamp, at least over Travis Glover and Kadeem Telfort, who were both in the playoff game against the Eagles. Now, I would argue that in that game against the Eagles, those players kind of showed that they weren't ready for prime time. So it does make sense that they're looking at other options at those positions. So interesting to see what's going on with the offensive line. I still don't think we're going to get a full feel for what's going on with this offensive line until Elton Jenkins is playing at center and we can see where the rest of the players develop due to training camp battles and adjustment to the new scheme. So don't read too much into the offensive line, but it's good to see those players getting some playing time while the starters are out. Starters being Walker, Banks, and Jenkins. Although, Walker's job, could he be in jeopardy? We're going to have to see in training camp, and once again, we will be there for that. Monk has been rotating at both center and right guard with Ryan, and that's very important to see because right now, how I theorize this will happen is Elton Jenkins will start at center. Assuming Sean Ryan wins the right guard position, he will be the right guard unless there's an injury to Jenkins, and then I think Sean Ryan will be pushed into center, and then Monk might come in at guard. So center is an extremely important position, and we want to make sure that that's covered sufficiently in the event that Jenkins is out. In addition, I want to give a shout out to Andy at the Pack Day podcast, who really emphasized the fact that Sean Ryan is really looking like he's in great shape this year. In the past, there's been problems with Sean Ryan showing up to training camp out of shape, but it looks like he's in season form right now, which makes a lot of sense because this is a contract year for him. So not a surprise that he wants to put everything into training camp to secure his starting job and he is playing for significant money next year, either with the Packers or somebody else, since his contract comes up. So let's take a look at defense now. Kenny Clark looks like he's over his foot injury. He was starting on the defensive line today. Starting defensive line with the ones right now was Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness on the edge. Clark was playing nose tackle, which I think is going to be a great move for him, spending more time at nose tackle in 2025. And Devontae Wyatt was playing the 3 technique defensive tackle. This is very exciting. I've kind of predicted from the beginning that Lucas Van Ness would be given every opportunity to win the starting job at defensive end this year over Inebare, who was the starter last year once they got rid of Preston Smith. So I think this is a strong indication that the Green Bay Packers are giving Lucas Van Ness every opportunity to win that starting job at defensive end in 2025. So I want to see how that develops in training camp once the pads are on. We talk a lot about iron sharpens iron as far as these training camp battles for a position, but it's equally important once they put the pads on. Lucas Van Ness is going to be going up against a very strong Green Bay Packers offensive line, and we're going to see if he can show that he has the ability to exceed what he did last year in 2025 against a really good offensive line in training camp. So I'll be watching that very closely when we're at practice at the start of training camp. So next topic I want to talk about is the fact that the Green Bay Packers are practicing on the 3rd day of minicamp. I predicted this in our last video. I said, don't be surprised if the Packers practice on the 3rd day of minicamp, because I do feel very strongly that this is a critical year for the Green Bay Packers. And I think the fact that the coaching staff has decided we are going to practice on day 3, which is always historically a team building exercise of some sort, I think they're sending a message to the whole organization that we need to shake things up. We need to do more than we did last year. We need to take advantage of every minute of practice to get better and step up our game for 2025. And I think this is really significant for the Packers. We've heard lots of stories in the offseason about team building outside of team exercises, whether it's Jordan Love's softball game, whether it's the fact that the defensive line has been having regular get-togethers for pizza, watching the NBA Finals, and also watching game tape, as signs that this team already has that organic team building firmly in place. You've got to remember, on offense, we're returning 10 of 11 starters. On defense, we're starting 10 of 11 starters from last year. And both of those new starters are actually improvements to what we had last year. So I don't think team building is as important as us taking advantage of every single rep that they have available in training camp and mini camp. So I think this is a significant factor here, and I see it as a really good sign that the Green Bay Packers, as an organization, are feeling what we heard from Goody before the draft, a sense of urgency that we need to make a push to the next level in 2025. So I'm very excited about that. I'm also very intrigued that the Detroit Lions lost their minicamp. They chose to cancel their minicamp because they're in the Hall of Fame game this year. So while the Packers are getting 3 days of quality practice and reps, the Detroit Lions are losing those 3 days because of the Hall of Fame game. And it makes me wonder if this different philosophy is going to be impactful, especially in week 1, because the Detroit Lions now only have 2 weeks of practice and 4 preseason games to figure out so many things that they have to figure out before the start of the season. They have to revamp their offensive line. They have to look at the fact that both of their coordinators are relatively inexperienced. Their defensive coordinator has not called a game ever, and their offensive coordinator has not called a game for over 10 years. So it's significant that the Detroit Lions are actually losing practice while the Packers are actually showing signs that they want to take advantage of every single practice that they have available. And I'm really curious to see if that's going to impact what happens to the division run this year, especially since the Green Bay Packers and Detroit Lions play on week 1. Is this going to be a factor in who wins that game and the division? So stay tuned for that one. So next, I want to take a few minutes to take a look at how the Packers and Lions are going to line up against each other in that Week 1 game, and how changes or perceived changes with the departure of Jair Alexander may or may not impact what we do in that game. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Let's switch over here. And we're using PFF here. Just because it's a very useful tool to look at the lineups. Don't take these ratings into consideration. PFF, in my opinion, does not do a great job of giving us ratings, especially on defense, because defense has a lot of intangibles that are not stat driven. And defense is so much of a weak link system that it has to do with the overall continuity and play of the group that matters more. You look at some of these ratings from PFF and you're like, wow, that's a top 10 defense? Yeah, that is a top 10 defense last year. And I think we're only going to improve this year. So take these ratings out of it. But what I want to talk about is how we're likely going to line up week 1 against the Detroit Lions, because I think it's significant here. Now, a couple notes here. Now, right now, it's showing Inigbare as the starter at right end. I think that's going to be Lucas Van Ness, and I think that'll be a positive change for us. At outside, we have Keyshawn Nixon and Nate Hobbs in the base defense, and I think that is how this defense is going to line up. Now, in the past, we had Carrington Valentine. Now, Carrington Valentine played great down the stretch last year. He did have a couple plays where he was exposed, especially in the Eagles game. But overall, he played very solidly. But he's actually now going to be our first corner off the bench with the addition of Nate Hobbs, who's going to play on the outside in the base defense. So we're going to have Keyshawn Nixon, most likely against Williams. We're going to have Hobbs against St. Brown on the outside. And we've got our excellent linebackers here. So here's another example. Quay Walker was playing a lot better than a 57 grade at the end of the season last year. So, you know, these numbers are very misleading. This defense looks like it's in great shape for next year, far better than they were in 2024. So, as we can see, we're going to have Nixon and Hobbs matched up on the outside in our base defense. This would be something we would typically see on first down and second down, where the down and distance is longer than 6 yards to get a first down. Now, much of the game is, of course, going to be in the nickel. So let's take a look at the nickel defense for the Green Bay Packers. This is where things get very interesting here. So I think a lot of things are going to come into play, and we're going to have to see what happens in training camp here. But I do believe that in a lot of nickel situations, especially against the Lions, for example, here, Nate Hobbs is going to be sometimes playing inside, in which they would probably bring Carrington Valentine off the bench to play outside corner. Or there are times that Nate Hobbs will be lined up against St. Brown as much as possible, because I do think one of the things that we're going to see against the Detroit Lions is St. Brown, for example, tends to move into the slot. And in those situations, Nate Hobbs is going to be a better matchup against St. Brown in the slot than, say, Javon Bullard. So I do think there are going to be situations where we see Hobbs actually follow St. Brown in that week one matchup. It's going to be case by case, and it might have to do with down and distance. But I do think if St. Brown is in the slot, they're going to put Hobbs in the slot against St. Brown. So it's going to be interesting to see that week one matchup. But the key reason I'm looking at this now, and it's far too early, we're going to look at this probably before the start of the season again, but Jair Alexander was not a part of our defense for most of last season and the season before that. So the impact that he had of his departure is really more than offset by the addition of Nate Hobbs. Nate Hobbs is a significant upgrade to our cornerback room that we did not have last year. And again, look at these returning starters, okay? We've got Williams and McKinney, returning starters. Cooper, Walker, returning starters. Nixon, Bullard, returning players. Bullard is a quasi-starter because he did play a lot. We've got Gary, who's going to be switched with Lucas Van Ness. And we've got our core of our defensive line, all returning starters. So the positives of the fact that we've had so little change in our defensive line, and if Lucas Van Ness is an improvement over Enigbare and Nate Hobbs is an improvement over Carrington Valentine, this defense has the potential to be really good in 2025. Now, one last note here. I talked earlier about the changes that we're going to see for the Lions offensive line in 2025. Let's take a look at that right now. So they've lost their center. Their all-pro elite center has retired. So right now they're going to put in a player that had one start last year probably as their center. And he was actually... No, because actually it's too early to tell. Let me restart. So right now, the options for Lions at center are either Mahogany, which is a draft pick this year, or we have Glasgow, who was the guard last year. He was the 50th guard out of 77. So to go from an elite center to a middling, below average guard as your starting center, or having a rookie as your starting center, these are very concerning for the Detroit Lions. Throw out this 91.5 grade. This is the draft grade that this player had. He has no experience in the NFL. So we have a below average guard and two possible rookies starting in the center of the offensive line for the Detroit Lions against a proven group of defensive linemen for the Packers that have the potential to be elite and very all-pro as far as their abilities. This is a huge mismatch that we're going to see week one against the Detroit Lions. So what happens here? If the Packers defensive line wins against the interior line of the Lions, several things are going to happen week one. We're going to have the running game for the Lions not be nearly as impressive as it was last year because they're not going to be able to run through the middle effectively. They're going to have to go out to the sides, which is going to be less effective, especially with Gibbs, whose style is to do a cut and run, and that's going to be really hard when he doesn't have clear running lanes in the start of the interior line. Next up, all these defensive linemen are going to be headed towards Jared Goff, who actually has one of the worst splits when under pressure in the middle. What do we have here? We're going to have a situation where Jared Goff is going to have pressure up the middle because his offensive line is not going to be up to the task of stopping the Packers' defensive line at least week one. They're going to need some time to adjust this. So this is why I think right here the Packers are in a great situation for week one. The Lions have limited practice time before week one. They only have 2 more weeks of practice and 4 preseason games, and their starting offensive line is not going to play for every one of those snaps in those preseason games. So the Lions really are in crunch time as far as figuring out what to do with their offensive line against a really stout defensive line for the Green Bay Packers. And this could easily be the key to the game week one, which, by the way, Pack Attack Cast will be there for week one, and we'll be reporting live from the game and after the game. So on that note, I just want to wrap up this edition of the Pack Attack Cast. Please give us a like and subscribe as we continue to bring you excellent content throughout the offseason and the regular season for your Green Bay Packers. As always, this is a stream for fans, from fans, and as always, go Pack Go.